Thomas Jefferson once said, "Evil trumps when good men do nothing." This probably doesn't relate much to most of us, but when faced with something in our lives that we can only describe as evil, wouldn't you want to have the courage to engage? The heroes from this latest season of Stranger Things were confronted with that very same question and rose to the occasion. Now, we would all like to imagine ourselves as the Els or Nancys in our story, but the reality is that it's not that easy when fear is a real trait. So real, in fact, that it spread through the United States in the 80s through news and media outlets as Satanic Paranoia. Back then, you couldn't flip through channels without some breaking news about young kids engaging in satanic rituals. Stranger Things Season 4 is filled to the brim with references to the occult, but the most important thing it could teach us is something we could possibly bring into our own lives. Amongst the constant bombardment of fear and paranoia through our media outlets in this day and age, an important scene for retrospection. One villainous scene. In Season 4, Episode 6, the conversation between the cop and the kid. After a long wait, Stranger Things finally came out with their latest season. Well, half of its latest season, which seems to be a trend with all these shows recently. Just call it what it is. Next one is Season 5. Anyway, I really enjoy the newest season, especially with its darker tones and very graphic violence. The part where the cheerleader just got her bones snapped was terrifying. After catching up with all the characters in a fun, happy-go-lucky montage, the juxtaposition was just so rapid. After binge watching this entire season in a day, something became very apparent to me. This season was very heavy on its referencing to the 1980s Satanic Panic. By the way, I didn't say spoilers yet, right? Because there will be spoilers, so just stop watching if you haven't caught up. But do not forget to come back to finish this video. Dungeons & Dragons became famous after the 1979 disappearance of James Dallas Egbert III, a 16-year-old Michigan State University student who mistakenly believed to have gotten lost in the steam tunnels below campus while playing a game of D&D. Supposedly, the game had become all too real in his head. That was a flat-out lie, because he just ran away to Louisiana. But the reality didn't get nearly as much press as a baseless suspicion that D&D drove him crazy. The story was so popular, it even inspired a book, Mazes and Monsters, then later into a movie starring Tom Hanks. After this whole fiasco, the media looked at D&D with a magnifying glass and started making the connections that there's probably something more than a Tolkien-inspired fantasy game. Immediately, the news began flooding about the children in America. Rock and roll didn't help out either, surprisingly. Suddenly, the devil was in every household in America. The scene I wanted to talk about was in the very beginning of episode 6, after witnessing his friend being levitated above the water, his bones cracking and eyes being taken away. The basketball captain was in shock. I forgot the guy's name and I refused to learn it, but how couldn't you be in shock? What explanation could you have after seeing something so vile? Only true evil could have done that. This kid has witnessed the devil himself, and because of that, he argues with a police officer and utters a sentence that made an impact on me. How can you expect to fight the devil when you don't believe he exists? I believe this is one villainous scene, not because of its implications or its metaphorical meanings, but taken from a very literal sense. In this world of Stranger Things, where the Upside Down exists, the devil is very real. He may be known as Vecna or one by others, but to this young kid, he's simply known as Satan. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he did not exist. Everyone else besides our protagonist in this little town of Hawkins may be left in the dark, but I believe in this upcoming season premiering on July 1st, everything will be brought to light. This scene is important because things in life can become unclear and frightening. With everything we see in the news or social media, we as a people need to have an idea about what the real threat in our lives could be. Instead of running around like headless chickens brought on by paranoia, propaganda is a real enemy, and deciphering through the muck could be the answer we need. I can't really tell you what it could be, but our collective insight is required and should be a priority. Evil exists, and like the kid says, how can we expect to fight it when we don't believe it does? Vecna goes after the guilt-ridden, which could be an attribute of sin. He's also expressed a disgust for humans, comparing them to a pest, a special kind of pest in his words. The devil in biblical references hates humans and wanted their downfall, fulfilling it in the book of Paradise Lost. I actually talk quite a bit about that book in another video of mine. If you're interested, go ahead and check it out. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos about people saying the show is satanic and you shouldn't watch it. Again, this is Satanic Panic. The same way the show is in the crosshairs from religious institutions, so was Dungeons & Dragons back in the day. The paranoia never did subside, but understanding that inspiration and written work can't be helped and is taken by literally everything. There's a reason the Bible is the greatest story ever told, and taking ideas from it is just a fact of imagination. I can't help but have an admiration for the work myself, and constantly seek inspiration from it. Vecna knows that guilt and trauma could very well end a person. In this same episode, there's a part where Lucas and Max begin talking. After the scare of almost being taken by Vecna, she begins to reconcile with Lucas. He mentions that he knew his friend in his basketball team was dealing with something personal after seeing him with a black eye. Lucas was upset to admit it, but he should have done more to help him. He wants Max to know that he sees her, meaning that he acknowledges her as a person emotionally. We all need to be aware of other people in our lives because any sort of compassion and caring, no matter how little we think of it, could mean the world for someone else. It could also prevent something horrible from happening. Even though we could never know the possible outcome, shouldn't the thought of loving another human being be enough? If we really do fall for the devil's greatest trick, then we should at the very least pretend he does exist regardless, because then we could treat each other as our greatest asset, as allies and brothers in a confusing and unnerving society. Thank you, everybody. Fulfilling it in the book of Paralyzed. Tom and Jeff references hates humans and wanted their downfall. Fulfilling it in a book of